Okay, welcome again to this evening's Master Dialogue. So I'm Gilbert from B-Lab Hong Kong and Macau. Today's topic is B Corporations, the future of business for a better society. So today we are very happy and honored to have Professor Marquis to be our guest speaker. Professor Marquis is the Samuel Johnson Professor in Sustainable Global Enterprise at the Cornell University. And I think to give you a better connection with Chris in this part of the world, Chris has been the visiting scholar in Peking University, Fudan University, and also Hong Kong UST, University of Science and Technology. So Chris has a deep connection with this part of the world. So today we also have a very honor to have KK to be our moderator. So KKJ is the founding director and co-chair of B-Lab Hong Kong and Macau, also a serial social entrepreneur in Hong Kong, and also the social innovation thought leader of the year 2020 by Schwab Foundation. So over to you, KK.
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you. And welcome, Chris. And welcome all the people coming to this session. We're very excited. I'm sure it will be very productive and exciting. Now, I'm supposed to say a few words, but I may speak longer than that, but I'll keep it short. Now, I hope you have the chance to read this book. If not, then maybe after today's session, you will have the strong motivation to read it. What I'd like to say is something that during my consultancy experience, I use this approach a lot. I call it scrambled eggs approach, scrambled eggs. Now, scrambled eggs is a very simple dish. You just use some eggs and then do a dish just with eggs. But in order to make scrambled eggs, what you need to do, you crack some eggs, put it in a bowl, and you do one more thing. You mix the yolk and the white together. You don't leave them separate. You don't put the separate yolk and eggs into the frying pan. Now, scrambled eggs approach reminds us there are two things involved. Yolk or white, they represent mind and heart. Mind and heart. Now, in many lectures or presentation or discussion or even dialogue, sometimes the focus is exclusively on the heart, sometimes on the mind. My experience is that in order for a session, a training session, an exchange session to be really successful, you have to engage everyone's, both their heart and the mind. The mind appeals to the intellect. It looks for facts, logic, arguments, whereas our heart needs to be touched, need to be nurtured, need to be inspired. I hope tonight you will find both. If you're just looking for facts, this book contains more than enough for you to digest. But I hope Chris' presentation and discussion with us will touch your heart, will move you to actions. So now I'll hand it over to you, Chris.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So that's quite a sort of a intimidating introduction. I have to touch people's hearts. As an academic, that's usually not where I go, but I'll do my best. It's a real honor. I always really enjoy my time with you, KK. It's great to be sort of virtually with all of you in Hong Kong, perhaps my favorite city in the world. I've spent many months there. I think this is now the third or fourth thing we've done together, KK. I did it.
Yes.
This is the big social enterprise conference once, and we did an event for some folks interested in B Corps, and maybe some other times we've gotten together online. So it's a real honor to be with you as part of this master dialogue. Let me see about sharing my screen, and we'll get started. Great. So you can see that okay? All right.
Yes.
So in an effort, I guess, with KK's introduction to touch your heart, let me just say, so this book that I worked on for a number of years, it was about 10 years of research I did on the B Corp movement, on B Lab, dating back to a case study, a Harvard Business School case study I did on B Lab in 2010, and many different sets of work I did on different B Corps. For the book, I interviewed over 60 different B Corps. Now that's up to probably over 100 different companies that have social mission at their core that I've interacted with. And this is actually the first book that I wrote, for an academic like myself. The sort of coin of the realm are academic papers. They're not actually books, but from interacting with everyone in this community, I was so just inspired by the interest in making the world better, not just sort of selling products and services, but actually using business as a force for good, that I really felt it was important to try to capture that and do my little part to actually, make the world a better place through business. So, I always really enjoy talking with folks. I'm going to go through this presentation. It has a lot of detail from the actual book. I understand from KK and Gilbert that it's a variety of folks in the audience. So for some of you, it might seem, where all of this. Please bear with us. I'm very excited to get to the Q&A part and hear all of your reactions. And I just want to say, in case I forget at the end, my email is here. Please be in touch if you have additional thoughts, if you're thinking about becoming a B Corp, if you're already a B Corp and interested in sort of sharing your story more. I mean, this is really, my passion and my interest. And so don't hesitate to be in touch. Okay, so when I wrote the book, and sort of the majority of the research I did actually was before COVID. And this is, sort of, I think made what all of us are doing even more important. The idea that, we have systemic issues in our, broadly speaking, capitalist market systems around environment issues, inequality, and this I think extends, throughout the globe. And there's, through this period that we've gone through, really a sense that we, in many ways, need to build back better and create, an economic system that is much more stakeholder driven. The World Economic Forum, great to see you sort of won the Schwab award, very well deserved. KK just occurred, and this was a big theme actually, the need to, for business to step up in an environmental ways to address global issues. The reason why I think there's so much attention to this more recently is that the path that we've been on for the past 50 years really has been focusing very much on shareholders. Markets throughout the world have really prioritized economic financial shareholders to the exclusion of other important stakeholders like communities, like employees, like the environment, et cetera. And so, this is not my argument. This is what many folks say, even when just recently at the World Economic Forum, when, many large companies from, Bank of America, in the US to others that are sort of committing to, focusing their operations more on stakeholders, say, we've gone too far down this path of focusing on shareholders over the past number of years. Just some, statistics. I'm not going to go into these in detail, but one of the issues with when you focus so much on shareholders is that the various externalities of companies get put to the wayside. So, if you have to meet quarterly earnings estimates, investing a little bit more in environmental pollution abatement doesn't take precedence. Stock options, which tie executives very closely to the share price, has resulted in massive economic inequality around the world. So, anyways, consensus we need to change. This World Economic Forum image there. The theme last year was about stakeholder capitalism. So this is from January of 2020. I need to update it with all of the sort of events and announcements from the 2021 Economic Forum, but it's really, there's tremendous momentum around changing the system. Business Roundtable in the United States, a group of leading CEOs from the 200 largest US companies came out with a statement, again, pre-COVID, that business need to be much more stakeholder driven. In some ways, the purpose of business is about stakeholders. The thing that is, I think where all of our work comes in is that, it's easy to say we're going to be more stakeholder driven, but it's actually very hard to go about that. And, for many of these companies at the World Economic Forum or the Business Roundtable that in 2020 committed to being stakeholder driven, so many have been exposed as like, well, the COVID hits and what do? You unnecessarily cut a variety of employees and employee benefits, but pay your CEO more and give more dividends to your shareholders. So, and I don't think necessarily, I try to be, relatively optimistic and give companies the benefit of the doubt and say, it's not that they're necessarily just really trying to be inauthentic and fooling the public and basically lying in their stakeholder orientation, but actually that's very hard to do. You can think about maybe philanthropy or, increasing employee benefits, but actually, the way that the institutions and norms and practices in the world are set up, it's actually really constrains companies. And this is where I think that the B Corp model and process is so important because it provides for all companies. You don't need to actually be a B Corp, but you can use these impact assessment, different governance models and frameworks to become more stakeholder driven, where sort of the actions can meet the words. And so the argument in the book is very much, I really hope that there's more B Corps. I just saw today that there's now 3,700. That's pretty small, and I think only will represent, really represent, I don't know, the heroes in the story, but all companies can actually become better. And so that's sort of the theme of the book. Through these different processes, companies can become better. And so you can see some very well-known B Corps over here. A number, including Education for Good, are from Hong Kong and around the world. Roshan, which you can see down there, is one of my favorite examples. It's actually the largest, maybe the largest employer in Afghanistan. It's the largest telecommunication company in Afghanistan. So here you have from Afghanistan to, Hong Kong to, Patagonia in the U.S., et cetera. So lots of well-known, companies commit to these different dimensions, which I'll say a little bit more about in a second. Okay, so I mentioned these tools that are real important, and I think many people on the call probably know about some of these tools. The B Impact Assessment is which companies have to go through to actually become a B Corp. 5 sections representing a broad array of stakeholders: governance, workers, customers, community, environment. You have to get 80 out of 200 to qualify. That's actually much harder than it sounds. As a professor, I talk to my students about B Corps and they say, if I got 40%, I would fail your class. And that's true, but actually, maybe in our discussion, some of those folks can talk about actually how hard it is to get that. The reason why companies that go through this, and I talk to people that use this, there's 3,700 B Corps, but over 100,000 companies, many leading banks, investment companies, use this as a way to sort of assess and manage companies. And so, the reason why I titled the book Better Business is that so many companies told me, we got into this because got into the B Corp movement because we believed in the social and environmental aspects and wanted to actually hold ourselves accountable for that. We came through the process actually just as a better run business. And here's, a variety of the reasons why. It's sort of a way to understand your company, tool for continuous improvement, a way to compare and learn, because you can actually, it's sort of a benchmark. There's benchmarking aspects to it. You can connect to other companies. So, this is my, those of you who are new to the movement or thinking about going through it, I mean, this is sort of my pitch to you, is that, almost all the companies I've talked to, testify that this is something that is an important way to actually help run your company. And if another sort of leading world actor, Larry Fink, who is CEO founder of BlackRock, which is, I think, the largest private investment company in the world, also tells the CEOs of the companies that he invests in to sort of measure, track, and manage ESG dimensions, because it's a way to actually improve the management quality and decrease long-term risk of the company, which is very consistent with this. In some ways, the B Impact Assessment is an ESG management tool for all companies to be able to use. This idea of becoming a better business, you can see that some of the research that have been done on B Corps coming out of the 2008 economic crisis. I think very salient today, given COVID. B Corps more likely to survive, and because they're better managed, essentially, have gone through and actually created systematic management processes and have a higher survival rate. So here's an example of what sort of a B Impact Assessment at a high level looks like. Patagonia, I mentioned 80 is really hard to get. Patagonia is sort of off the charts in one of the highest scores, but you can see it's sort of divided around a variety of them. You can very well known for its environment features, so scores very high on the environment. One of the things I think is important is that you can see how this tool can be used over time through what is on sort of the right hand side here. In 2011, its first impact score was 107, is now sort of up to 151. So this is something where actually the impact assessment, it actually gets harder every 3 years as B-Lab, the NGO that sort of certifies companies, becomes more sort of nuanced in understanding of impact and trying to have sort of the impact be much more about impacts in the world and outcomes as opposed to actually intermediate impacts. Yeah, as I mentioned, over 100,000 users of the BIA. One of my favorite examples is a Canadian bank, BDC. They actually use the tool to assess their lendees. So you want to borrow money from BDC, you actually have to go through a version of the B Impact Assessment because they see the value. Talk to many impact investor VC companies. Other VC companies that are non-impact investors use this to assess their portfolio. So it's a very robust management tool. So I mentioned this idea of impact investing, and you can see how these traditional VCs. I mean, these are all, I believe, U.S. based, but some of the leading venture capital companies in the world. From Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia. Sequoia, I know, is a very big sort of Asia and China footprint as well, although headquartered in Silicon Valley. They've all invested in many B Corps, and this is I think a testament to, these are probably, some of the most financial return focused actors in the world, and they are seeing value in companies with a social mission. I don't think it's because they have. I'm sure they have consciences, but they're doing this because these companies actually are super well run and delivering tremendous value. And so you can see, many companies B Corps have started to go public. In this past summer, a few, Lemonade and Vital Farms, went public on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. Lemonade is an online insurer. Vital Farms is a pasture-raised dairy and egg company. Just recently, AppHarvest, which is a company that does indoor farming. They have a 60-acre indoor farm. went public just actually in the last few days. They've been announced actually in the fall, but just went public. So with this movement, as well as the tremendous amount of VC investment in B Corps, really suggests to me that over the coming decade, the public markets in many ways also, I think, are going to be transformed as all these companies sort of go through this pipeline and become public. I mean, these venture investors, I mean, they're expecting an exit from their companies, and so there'll be lots of these companies going public. One of the things I think is even a bigger impact is, so the B impact assessment is sort of the y-axis in the 2x2 that I showed you previously. So the bottom part, the x-axis, is governance. And so I'll say a little bit about sort of the governance provisions of this model. Actually, let me jump ahead to that. So something called a benefit corporation, which has spread around the U.S. Actually, now 38 states have passed it. Also, not just in the U.S., but Italy, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, I understand, has also passed it. Uruguay has passed it, one of the chambers of their legislature. Canada, as a country, is in the process of going through this, in addition to British Columbia, as well as many other locations in the world. But anyway, so this is something where there's purpose. Businesses, as opposed to being beholden to shareholders, actually have an articulated material purpose on society and the environment in addition. So this is encoded in some ways, the DNA, the founding charter of the company. And a really important part of this is to be accountable and transparent. So I think it's great that companies are articulating this, but unless they actually go through a process of documenting and showing it, it's very easy to sort of slip away from that. So let me jump back here. So this idea of benefit corporations has started to also spread through public companies. We have, Danone, $30 billion company headquartered in Paris, nutrition, health focused, changed its articles of incorporation this summer to actually reflect stakeholder provisions. I actually attended the meeting where this vote occurred virtually. Of course, this was sort of COVID. Over 99% passage. In the U.S., two public companies have recently taken votes to change their articles of incorporation: Viva and Amalgamated Bank. So think about this. I mean, so you think about companies like Lemonade or App Harvest or whoever, they go public. The investors in those companies, they know what they're getting because this is all disclosed in the documents, and there's going to be many other companies that go public. But you think about, these are companies that have existing shareholders, some of the largest institutional shareholders in the world, and they're changing their articles of incorporation. And it's something where, in all of these, 99% of the votes came in favor of this actually changing governance. So this is important. Another key aspect of this model is how it transforms the company internally. And if you think about a company, really the most important part of it is the culture, the employees, how they feel empowered, are productive, and there is tons of research on how companies with social missions are much more effective in attracting and retaining their employees. And if you look at B Corps, we find this exact same process. So, as I was doing the research, many people, many companies, from Athleta, which is, global sort of athletic wear, yoga brand, described how, when people apply to Athleta, 25% and more say, on the application, why do you want to come work at Athleta? And it's because, you're a B Corp, is what people are saying. So, this is hugely influential in attracting employees. I think another important aspect of it is retention. So many of the companies that I talked to as well described how, going through this process effectively, really helped them build a culture where people wanted to stay. Here is an example from Tim Masson. This is Ian Martin Group, which is a Canadian-based sort of IT consulting and outsourcing company. Most of its operations are in India. Described that, typical turnover in their industries is 40 to 50%. After going through everything of becoming a B Corp, they lowered it to 10%. And again, I've heard scores of companies have talked about how, this process leads to retention effects. It's a global movement. I showed you some of the, Hong Kong-based ones. Education for Good is on this one. I mentioned Roshan. There's First Respond, which DE Fanying, which is the first B Corp in China, in mainland China. For all over the world, over 50% of B Corps are outside of the US. UK has many. Bridges as an example. Australia, Small Giants. Tony's Chocolonely, I love that name. I talked to some of the folks at Tony's Chocolonely. It's actually based in the Netherlands, a chocolate company, makes fantastic products and is very active in fighting the problems with, child labor, slavery in the chocolate supply chain. Natura is also a very well-known one. It's Brazil-based and very large company, about $10 billion company, owns The Body Shop and also owns Avon, which is big cosmetics firms. One of the things that, as I've gone through, the past 10 years of teaching and researching on this topic, again and again, different objections come up, and it's great just sort of looking back to see how many of them have sort of been surpassed. So one of the objections has always been, this is great for small little companies, but it won't work for larger or public companies. The examples I showed you of the investment of private investors, of going public, of companies changing their articles of incorporation, suggest that actually the public market aspect of that sort of statement has been overturned. And B-Lab has been very active in working with larger companies to really show how this model is important for not just small and medium-sized companies, but also some of the largest companies in the world. So I mentioned Danone. Danone, currently, I think about 45% of the sales of Danone are in B Corp subsidiaries. So, like many companies, Danone has probably 100, legal subsidiaries. Largest of its subsidiaries, Danone North America, which is about a $6 billion company, is a B Corp. Natura I mentioned, is large Brazilian cosmetics company, and these two companies are working together with other companies, that large multinational companies that want to actually become B Corps over time. And you can see here the scale and scope of these. And I think this is a hugely important turn of events in this last year in the B Corp movement, because it's a way for larger companies to become increasingly involved in the movement. It's actually very, I mentioned the 80 out of 200. It's actually very hard for companies to go through the process. Imagine if you're just a small company. Imagine if you're, a company with tens of billions in revenue, operations in, 100 plus countries, many legal subsidiaries. It's actually very complex. So all these companies that I have listed up, that are listed up here, are part of this inaugural program to really understand how large multinational companies can actually, become, sort of have a slower on-ramp to becoming B Corp. So in addition to Danone and Natura, I mentioned Magalu, which is a Brazilian-based retailer, Godovian, which is a Swiss fragrance company, Guerdoux, which is a Brazilian steelmaker, and Bondaloo, which is a French sort of vegetable and natural farming company. So, one of the things that might stand out is that, at least stands out to me, and I've done some writing about this, is that these are all Latin America or European examples. And my guess is that while the B Corp movement, I think, started in the US, or definitely started in the US and has sort of expanded, I think that because of how capitalism is practiced in Europe, in Latin America, in other places of the world, that really this is the future in some ways. It sort of is a much more sort of global, and I think the centers of gravity will be Europe and Latin America as the movement moves forward. I mentioned subsidiaries, sort of here are some examples of some, not just Danone. Here's a few of the subsidiaries. Also, Unilever is another really large supporter with, Ben and Jerry, 7th Generation, et cetera, many sort of global brands that might, so, Fetzer is a US winery, but owned by Chilean Conchi Toro. Four Pines Brewery is an Australian, I'm pretty sure, brewery, but owned by US-based US-based Anheuser-Busch. Overdrive is a really interesting example because it's an app that, it might be a computer program more generally, where people can sort of listen and borrow books, for to listen from your libraries. I use it use it all the time, actually. So I live in New York City, but some of the work I do, Cornell has a campus in New York City, but also I have to go to Ithaca, which is about a 3.5-hour drive. So I do a lot of listening to books on tape. I found out recently this is actually a subsidiary of Rakuten, the Japanese online store. So there's a lot of these global connections and subsidiaries, which people may not realize, that I think is actually a real strength of the movement. Another strength, I think, globally is how it's connected into the UN SDGs. These are, as I think you all know, these 17 really important global priorities that the UN has defined, that countries are working towards. And I think that it's very hard sometimes for businesses to think about how they can actually help with these goals, but these tools that B-Lab has designed actually are integrated to help. Just a sort of, I'm about done. I want to get time for a question and answer too. So one of the UN SDGs is on responsible consumption and production. And this is something where all of us as consumers, through our purchases, can actually make a difference in the world. There is, this is a US-based survey, but I've, talking to people around the world, I think that, from, Europe and Latin America might be above on this. And, even I know in China, a lot of younger people are really focused on, interested in being conscious consumers, buying from socially responsible companies. But it's actually hard to know what companies are actually doing that, or actually, sort of doing the right thing. The example of the Business Roundtable from the US that I gave earlier, where many of these companies say they're going to be stakeholder oriented, but like a year later, when you look at them, you find out actually, the walk is not matching the talk. And I think this is really where the B Corp label is so important, because it's something where companies can see, or individuals, consumers can see, this is a company that is doing well, and we can count on this company, and we should buy from this company. So with that, I want to say, a recent campaign of B-Lab has been, how your dollars, how your, Hong Kong dollars, US dollars, renminbi, whatever country you're in, you can actually, vote with those, choose companies that are doing well in the world. I know I try with all of my purchases as much as possible to buy from social mission or local businesses. And I think this is a way that all of us can actually make a difference in the world. And the more and more people that do this, the more businesses will be focused in that way, and the more actually sustainable the world will be. So thank you very much. Here's my my email, and really looking forward to the questions, answers, and comments. So thank you, KK. Thank you, Gilbert, for this great invitation.
Thank you very much. Now let's open it to the floor. Anyone have any questions? Just unmute yourself.
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Carol, go ahead.
Yes.
Great, thanks. So thanks for the presentation. It's great, and I've read your book as well. One of the things that I'm interested in hearing about is your view on, well, you've had the election now, you have a new administration in place in the US. And I know that some of the politicians more on the left side, like Elizabeth Warren, has in the past pushed for more of a stakeholder approach and taxing the really big companies. Do you see that? Because of course the whole movement also need to sort of try to get the politicians on board to drive legislation, right? Do you see any, and US is a place that people are looking at. I mean, you're both a leader, and then in this respect, you're also kind of a little bit behind, like you said. I'm Scandinavian myself, so some of the stuff would be impact assessment is sort of daily stuff that you do in Scandinavia.
Right.
But how do you see that? I mean, with the next 4 years, do you see any possibilities or any openings there?
I certainly hope so. You know, I mean, I think that, I mean, like you, and I think this is why I think the center of gravity of this movement in the future is going to be in, you know, Europe and Latin America, because I think that the way the governments, the sort of regulations and norms are much more focused on stakeholders. I think that in the US, you know, there is a lot of talk from the leading business actors, you know, leading politicians even. You know, you mentioned Elizabeth Warren, her Accountable Capitalism Act actually was based on many of the ideas of benefit corporation. But even on the right-hand side, you know, Marco Rubio, which is one of the more conservative politicians, actually also rails against shareholder primacy. And I'm happy to, you know, I didn't include my slide on that because this is a global audience, but when I talk to US audiences, I actually have a slide that sort of pits, that sort of describes, has both Marco Rubio and Elizabeth Warren, who say that, you know, this shareholder primacy, he even says, for the cancer that's killing American competitiveness, because it focuses people so much short-term oriented. So I really do think that actually some sort of legislation around this is absolutely essential, because through voluntary action, you know, it's going to hit a wall. I don't think it's going to be, or if there's actually some, you know, economic problems. And so I really do hope. I mean, obviously there's COVID, there's climate issues that the Biden administration is focusing on, but I do hope that some reform of our, you know, sort of corporate law system is, you know, also will transpire. From what I understand, there is work being done with a number of US senators, Elizabeth Warren being one of them, to try to actually work on that. And BLAB, actually, the folks at BLAB and Chief Justice Strine, who was formerly the Chief Justice of the Delaware Supreme Court, is also actively involved in that. So there is some work, but it's, I don't see it happening, you know, immediately, but I'm very hopeful that it is something that rises to the agenda, because I do think it's absolutely essential.
Thank you. John, you'd like to say something?
Yes, hi. Yes, and it's good to see you again. I saw you you came by our office in Hong Kong, so I wanted to thank you, and it's great to see you again.
Great.
So one of my questions revolves around technology, and I imagine it would tie into blockchain at some point in terms of the way it works. How do you see technology being used to, and I hate the word police, but to monitor the traceability of the B Corp parameters?
Yeah, I think that so I'm not sort of a technologist, but I do think that accountability is hugely, I mean, it is a cornerstone of this, and I think that the more ways that people can, that businesses can sort of, you know, show that they're actually doing what they're saying, it's tremendously important. I know that, you know, a number of, you know, sort of supply chain traceability frameworks and tools exist that, you know, like this Tony Chocolonely from the Netherlands that I mentioned, actually uses some sort of, with its the cacao beans, some sort of traceability. It might be blockchain based, I'm not exactly sure, but I do think that, you know, particularly for companies that have supply chains into sort of situations where there is a lot of sort of socially responsible abuse going on, that actually, using technologies to be able to sort of monitor and track and be transparent is hugely important. And more generally, I think, data and the push for data is also really important. So even things like all companies, like for instance, maybe, I think in the US, it's particularly salient around, sort of racial inequalities, discrimination in employment. I think, gender issues also span the globe. I think that companies holding them accountable to disclose and report on those issues. I mean, it's not necessarily blockchain based, but I do think that, that data more broadly is an hugely important element to this accountability and transparency part of this.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I was just the blockchain part was that makes complete sense to add the element in terms of the racial equality, in terms of gender equality. Yep. I was just referring more to the supply chain piece. But thank you for your answer. Right. I'm clear. Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you.
So I would say Wanda from GlobeScan has a question to you, Chris.
Sure.
He said that B Corp has been around for 10 years and certainly have made some progress, but still we only got 3,700. How right. what we can do or how we can accelerate the movement? Any views from you?
Sure. So I think a couple things. So I agree. So 3,700 sounds like a low number for 10 years. However, as I see it, and sort of the argument in many ways of the book is that, the real measure of success is not necessarily the number of B Corps, but actually, companies using different parts of the model to becoming more stakeholder driven. So, there's around the world now, these benefit corporations, certainly, well over 10,000. It's hard to count because, it's a, sort of, in Italy, British Columbia. So I think that over 100,000 companies use the B impact assessment. I think it's part of actually shining a light on the importance of ESG and how companies are using transparency around ESG. I think that actually the number 3,700 is not necessarily the right measure of whether it's a success or not. But I do think, though, for the next phase, I think that consumers need to be much more aware of the logo and importance of responsible consumption. So I see tremendous progress in the past 10 years in the legal realm. So this new type of company that's spreading the word. I see a lot of progress in the investment realm. So companies going public, companies changing their articles of incorporation. So many companies having mainstream venture investment. Actually, many mainstream venture companies are actually converting to B Corps because they get exposed to it and they say this model really makes sense. We're not impact investors, but we actually are going to become B Corps because we believe in it. So I think that, legal wise, finance wise, there's been really, I think, significant progress. I think that, to really scale it and have it be important, not just number of B Corps, but actually responsible business more generally. I think we need to do much more around consumer awareness, and so I think the next 10 years is where that's sort of the key. And I think that more and more companies are putting the B Corp logo on their products, so I think that will only help. And I think that events like this help, and that's why I'm always really enthusiastic to get out and talk to diverse people, because it's really important. And I end the talk with, we all can do better.
Wanda, any views from you to add on?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think that's a great answer, because the number of B Corps itself, it remains a drop in the ocean. But it is true, of course, that mainstream companies are adopting a lot of principles from the B Corp operations. I like that answer. I think consumers are also gradually getting on board, and investors are already on board. I mean, investors are relatively the easier part nowadays because they all go for sustainability. I mean, my big question is maybe more, and that's why you're pointing at consumers. How can we make this mainstream? How can we make sure that conscious capitalism becomes the
Right.
norm rather than the exception. How can we make sure that when people shop, they shop consciously for the right products? I mean, that's perhaps the big overarching question, and I think you addressed that partly.
Yeah, and I also want to say too that actually I see actually the number of B Corps being low is in some ways a positive, because it's hard to become a B Corp, and there's actually some teeth in the process. And I think if every company could become a B Corp, then I think that actually the value of shining a light on these companies would decrease. So, and I think there's a lot of things we all can do around the consumer part, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I half agree with you. It's hard to become a B Corp. So I work for Globescan and we are a B Corp.
Okay.
It's not so difficult, but it's just a lot of work. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not too complicated. It's like an ISO certification. You have to do all the
It's
right,
a certification, exactly.
and you have to document it. So it's pretty tedious, but it's not so hard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I want to particularly say, tonight we welcome our friends to Hong Kong, but today we also very happy to have our friends from Taiwan B Lab. So I
Great.
would like to introduce Chloe. Chloe is the executive director of B Lab Taiwan. Maybe Chloe, you can say a few words to us, and also maybe you can share some views with Chris. Chloe.
Great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi, Chloe.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Gilbert and KK, and thanks a lot to Chris's fantastic presentation and the research. We've ordered your book; it's still on the way.
Great.
Look forward to reading to it, and yeah, it's really amazing how we came all the way to today's status, especially ESG is getting so much attention, and so more and more companies are paying attention to B Corp movement. To especially these 2 days, we just learned Coursera, the online
Right. That's awesome.
platform,
Yeah.
just joined B Corp community. Yeah. So I have a question to ask you, Chris. Among the more than 100 B Corps you talked to, have you found some systematic or so some trend linking their B Corp certification with their business growth? This is a very practical question we've been always asked. So what's the benefit, the exact, very tangible benefits for becoming B Corp? Do we have any hard data, any research results to share with us? Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So I'll say a couple things. One is that, broadly speaking, companies that have a social mission and are socially responsible perform better. So this is something where there's been literally hundreds of academic studies that have shown this relationship. If you see Mr. Fink, who I mentioned, from BlackRock, described some of these in his recent letter just within the last week or two, around sort of companies becoming carbon neutral. So I think so at a high level, there is a lot of evidence. Regarding B Corp specifically, there are some studies. I noted some in there about companies doing better after the 2008 financial crisis. There's other examples of B Corps, sort of like Ben and Jerry's sort of sales growth based on its social mission. I would say from my research, and when you get the book, you can see some of this. So because there's these hundreds of studies, I actually focus much more on the stories of the companies, and you can see there's a number of many stories in there of companies where they implement this this system, and their management they believe their management quality is better, which leads to things like decreased attrition, hiring people. So I think that the business drivers are through the company being actually better run more generally, which is consistent with what Larry Fink's saying, and I think also with employee sort of retention and attraction. And there's lots of examples in there of that. And there's also systematic research that backs those processes up. Where I think that there's not yet enough evidence is putting a B Corp logo, or excuse me, putting the B logo on your product will lead to more sales. I think I'm optimistic about that, but I think that there's less evidence for that. But I think that sort of in risk management, management quality, and employee retention and attraction, there's lots of evidence.
Thank you, Chris. While Corey is there, Hong Kong, our friends in Hong Kong would love to hear a little bit about B Corp development in Taiwan. Could you say something about this? Now, for those who have not been to Taiwan, in terms of visiting B Corps, actually 2 years ago, we organized a B Corp study tour to Taiwan. Fantastic. Seeing is believing. We would love
I want to go on the next one. I'm really interested, Chloe, to learn more as well. I mean, I was in Taiwan. Last time I was in Taiwan was in 1997. I think that Taiwan has changed a lot since then. And I know that I had a student actually went to Taiwan and interviewed a bunch of B Corps maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm really interested to hear as well, Chloe. So please let us know about Taiwan.
Yeah. Welcome you all to visit Taiwan. Yeah, after the COVID-19. Yeah,
Right.
now we have COVID-21 already. Yeah, but hopefully it will be get under control very soon. Yeah, indeed, B Corp is getting more attention in Taiwan from last year as well. Especially ESG is gaining a lot of attention, and just as Chris mentioned, the finance side and risk management side, and people also new younger employees want purpose on job at work. So about Taiwan's B Corp movement, actually we have all bank became the first public listed bank becoming a B Corp in 2017. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the first publicly listed bank becoming B Corp worldwide. And also Taiwan also made a special record on B Corp movement. In 2016, we organized the first Asia forum of B Corp movement in Taipei. And we invited the president of Taiwan, Ma Ying-jeou, attended the forum, giving 20-minute speech. So we are really well blessed. Since the launch of 2016, politicians and also academia. Also in Taiwan, we have 2 universities. They have a B Academy at school. And so university side, government side, and also a bunch of business for good community join us to support the movement. So far, up to date, we have 29 B Corps, still very, very small portion of the huge SMEs in Taiwan, but just like someone just mentioned, we are a drop in the ocean, but we all have the belief, strong belief, we can overturn the business world someday, for a better world.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. And you can see, I think my email's there. If you wouldn't mind sending me an email, or KK or Gilbert, if you could connect us. I want to learn more about that bank in particular. You know, I'm doing some research on sort of B Corp banks now. And I did not know about that bank in Taiwan that was public in 2017. So would love to learn more. So thank you.
Sure. Absolutely. And please add Taiwan on your map, the global movement page. Taiwan.
I mean, so I'm sorry, Taiwan's not on the move, but I do have actually it on the benefit corporation status.
Yes, thank you.
And I know the President Ma had said positive things about the B Corp movement as well, which is hugely inspiring.
Yeah, we just talked to the Minister Audrey Tang about benefit corporation law in action as well.
Super.
Very good, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. Yeah.
Thank you, KK.
As long as travel restrictions are lifted, we will be coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that will inform you, Chris. You can join us from the States.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Very well. Now time is running out. I'd like to say just one more thing. It has been very, very difficult in Hong Kong to promote the B Corp movement, but we are not deterred. We will continue to do our work. But we have to be more imaginative, and we have to get more people involved. But I have a crazy, more you can say big ideas. Now in Hong Kong, we talk a lot about Belt and Road.
Yes.
And then recently we talk about Greater Bay Area. Meaning that we would like Hong Kong businesses and people going to these two big regions to do business, seek employment, whatever. I have a dream that one day companies from Hong Kong going into these two zones will all be B Corps. And that will make a tremendous difference. Because right now, if they are not B Corps and they work over there, they are sustaining the old form of capitalism. So I would like to see companies who are going to Belt and Road, Greater Bay Area, try to be a B Corp. And then you will make a better impact in these regions. Unlike some of the companies currently operating there, especially in Belt and Road area, company from China, for example, they are not liked by local people. They just go there for business. They just want to exploit the natural resources there.
Right.
They just want to create demand for Chinese products. They don't give any consideration to the local economy. And if they are a B Corp, they would have to change their mode of operation fundamentally. Anyway, so thank you very much, Chris, and thank you all the participants. We are very fortunate to hold this dialogue. There will be more of such occasions in which we will invite leading scholars, experts from all over the world to have a dialogue with us.